The year is 1455. You're standing on a muddy street in a German city whose name you've already forgotten, staring at a timber frame building that looks like it's holding itself up through sheer spite. The paint is peeling. The shutters hang crooked, and from inside you can hear laughter, rough and loud, mixed with something else. Something that makes your stomach twist. You know what this place is. Everyone knows. The painted sign above the door shows a rose, faded and chipped, but the meaning is clear. This is a municipal brothel, a legal, government-sanctioned house where women sell their bodies to strangers. And in a few moments, you're going to walk through that door, not as a customer, but as one of the women who works here. Forever, or close enough to it. Before we step inside, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives into history's darker corners. Drop your city and the current time in the comments. I love seeing where you're watching from and knowing I'm not alone in being weirdly fascinated by this stuff. Now, let's ease into tonight's story together. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's talk about what it was really like to be a sex worker in medieval Europe. Not the romanticized version, the real one. The one that smells like sweat and fear and the kind of desperation that makes your bones ache. You take a breath. The air here is thick with wood smoke and something sour, like ale left too long in the sun. Somewhere nearby, a pig squeals, a dog barks. Life goes on around you, indifferent and relentless. You're here because you have no choice. Maybe it's debt. Maybe you borrowed money you couldn't repay, and now the brothel keeper owns that debt, and you along with it. Maybe your family sold you, traded your body for enough coin to survive another winter. Maybe you were raped, and once that happened, you were considered ruined, dishonored, unfit for respectable life. So here you are. Or maybe you were a servant, a kitchen maid working in someone's household, and one day a man decided you were available for more than cooking. You resisted. It didn't matter. And when your mistress found out, she didn't punish him. She threw you out. Because you, not him, were the problem. This is how it works. Women fall through cracks in the social order, and the brothel is where they land. Not because they want to, but because there's nowhere else to go. The door opens before you can knock. A woman stands there, broad-shouldered and hard-eyed, with a face that's seen too much and stopped caring somewhere around the third or fourth time her heart broke. She looks you over like your livestock. Then she nods. You'll do. She waves you inside. The interior is darker than you expected. A few tallow candles flicker on rough-hewn tables. The ceiling is low, stained with smoke. The floor is dirt, covered in straw that looks like it hasn't been changed in weeks. There are benches along the walls, a fireplace in the corner, barely lit, and women. 12 of them, maybe more, sitting, standing, waiting. They range in age from maybe 15 to 30, though it's hard to tell. Life here ages you fast. Some are mending clothes, some are staring at nothing. One is crying quietly in the corner, and no one is paying attention. The brothel keeper, the woman who let you in, is called Gertrude. You'll learn her name soon enough because she'll say it often, usually while reminding you that she owns you. She's been appointed by the town council, sworn in by the mayor himself. This is an official position. She pays rent to the city, 70 gold coins a year, and in return, she gets to run this place however she wants. Which means she gets to run you however she wants. She tells you the rules. You'll work every night except holy days. You'll see as many clients as she decides. You'll hand over every coin you make, and she'll give you back a fraction. Maybe. You'll wear the clothing she provides. You will not leave without permission. You will not refuse a client unless he's visibly diseased, and even then, you better be sure, because if you're wrong, you'll be whipped. You nod. You don't have a choice. Gertrude shows you to your space. Calling it a room would be generous. It's a corner partitioned off with a moth-eaten curtain. There's a straw pallet on the floor, a scratchy wool blanket, and a wooden bucket. That's it. That's where you'll sleep, when you're allowed to sleep. That's where you'll bring clients. That's your entire world now, a space barely big enough to lie down in. The other women don't introduce themselves. They've seen this before. New girls come in wide-eyed and terrified, and within weeks, they either harden or break. You're just another body in the rotation. But one woman, younger than the others, maybe 17, catches your eye. Her name is Ilse. She's been here 6 months. She tells you this quietly, like she's confessing a sin. 6 months feels like 6 years, she says. You'll understand soon enough. That first night is worse than you imagined. You're given clothing, a yellowed linen shift, and a hood with a stripe of red fabric sewn into it. This is how people will know what you are. In some cities, sex workers wear yellow veils. In others, bells sewn into their hats. Here, it's the striped hood. You're marked now, visible, identifiable, dishonored. The clients start arriving after dark. They come in smelling like ale and sweat and entitlement. Some are merchants, some are labourers, some are soldiers passing through. They pay Gertrude at the door, a few coins, nothing extravagant. This isn't a luxury establishment. This is for men who can't afford better. You're assigned your first client within an hour. He's older, rough hands, missing teeth. He doesn't speak to you, doesn't look at you, not really. You're not a person to him. You're a service. He pays. You take him behind your curtain. What happens next is mechanical, joyless, fast. He finishes. He leaves. You lie there on the straw, staring at the ceiling, feeling like something inside you just cracked. But there's no time to process it. Gertrude is already sending in the next one. This is your life now. You see 5 men that first night. By the time the brothel closes, just before dawn, you can barely stand. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. You're sore, bruised, and so exhausted you could cry, except you don't have the energy for tears. Ilse finds you afterward, sitting in the dark, and she doesn't say anything. She just sits beside you. That's all the comfort you get here. Silence and proximity. Morning comes too soon. You thought maybe you'd get to rest, but no. There are chores. The brothel has to be cleaned. The straw has to be changed sometimes. The fire has to be tended. And if you're lucky, there's food. Thin soup, stale bread, maybe some cheese if Gertrude is feeling generous. You eat because you have to, not because you want to. How did it come to this? How did an entire society decide that this was acceptable, even necessary? The answer is both simple and infuriating. Medieval Europe was deeply conflicted about sex. The church taught that celibacy was the highest virtue, that sex was sinful unless it was for procreation within marriage. But people, being people, wanted sex anyway. And the men who ran the cities, those respectable town councillors and guildmasters, they had a problem. Young men, especially unmarried ones, were restless. If they couldn't satisfy their urges legally, they might assault respectable women, wives and daughters of citizens. That, the authorities decided, was unacceptable. So they came up with a solution: provide an outlet, a place where men could go to release their, let's call it energy, without endangering the virtue of honest women. Enter the brothel. Not an illegal underground operation, but a fully sanctioned city-run institution. The logic was brutal but practical. better to have a designated group of dishonored women absorb male violence than to let that violence spill out into the general population. St. Augustine, one of the most influential theologians in Christian history, put it bluntly. "Remove prostitutes from society," he wrote, "and you will destroy everything with lust." In other words, prostitution was a necessary evil, a kind of social sewer that kept the rest of the city clean. Thomas Aquinas agreed. He compared prostitution to a cesspool in a palace. "Take away the cesspool," he said, "and the palace becomes an unclean and evil-smelling place." Charming. So cities across Europe, especially in Germany, France, Italy, and parts of Spain, established municipal brothels. These weren't hidden or shameful. They were official businesses, licensed and taxed. The brothel keeper was appointed by the town council. The building was owned or leased by the city, and the women who worked there, women like you, were considered part of the civic infrastructure, like the butcher or the blacksmith. Except your job was to absorb the sexual and often violent impulses of men who didn't want to pay for a wife. Of course, this didn't mean you were respected. Far from it. You were useful, but you were also despised. You were necessary, but you were also sinful. The same men who visited you at night would cross the street to avoid you during the day. The same priests who justified the brothel's existence would preach sermons about your wickedness. You were caught in a paradox, essential and reviled, protected by law and destroyed by it. The system was designed not for your benefit, but for everyone else's, and once you entered, there was almost no way out. The women who end up here come from everywhere and nowhere. Most are poor, desperately, hopelessly poor. Poverty is the engine that drives this whole operation. You might have been a farmer's daughter whose family couldn't feed all their children, so they sold you to a brothel keeper for a few coins. You might have been a widow with no inheritance, no male relatives to support you, and no legal right to own property. You might have been a servant who lost her position and had nowhere else to go. Starvation or the brothel. Those were your choices. Then there's debt. This is how Gertrude got most of her women. She lends money at impossible rates. A woman borrows 5 coins to pay for her mother's funeral. Within months, with interest and fees, she owes 50. She can't pay. So Gertrude offers a deal. Work it off. Just a few months, she says. Except the debt never decreases. Gertrude charges you for everything. Your food, your lodging, your clothes, every candle burned in your space. Every time she has to discipline you, the debt grows faster than you can work, and suddenly, a few months turns into forever. You're trapped, legally bound by debt you can never repay. Some women are trafficked, pure and simple. There's a case from Dijon in 1454. A young noblewoman named Marie de Leston. She was travelling with a man named Drouet, who promised to escort her safely. Instead, he took her to a brothel and tried to sell her to the madam. Marie begged for mercy. She revealed her noble status, thinking that might save her. The madam balked, afraid of executing a noble woman, which carried the death penalty. But Drouet didn't give up. He kept Marie at an inn for 2 weeks, beating her, threatening her life, trying to break her will. He used her jewelry to pay for his lodging. Eventually, she was rescued, but only because her noble blood made her valuable enough to matter. Most women don't have that privilege. Then there are the rape victims. If a woman was raped, medieval society often treated her as ruined. Her virginity, her honor, her value as a potential wife all destroyed. And rather than punish the rapist, authorities would sometimes force the woman into a brothel, arguing that since she was already dishonored, she might as well make herself useful. This wasn't rare. It was policy in some cities. Groups of young men would roam the streets at night, looking for women to assault. These weren't isolated incidents. In Dijon alone, between 1436 and 1486, there were over 125 documented cases of public rape. Most went unpunished. And many of the victims ended up here, in places like this, because society decided they had nowhere else to belong. Some women, a very few, entered voluntarily. But voluntary is a strong word when your alternative is starvation. You might choose the brothel because it offers food, shelter, and a slim chance of survival. That doesn't mean you want to be here. It means you're out of options. There's a myth that prostitutes could leave after saving enough money for a dowry, marry, and return to respectability. This was technically possible, and the church loved to invoke the story of Mary Magdalene, the redeemed prostitute, as proof that salvation was available. But in reality, almost no one made it out. The debt was designed to be inescapable. The stigma was permanent, and even if you somehow saved enough money, which brothel keeper would let you leave? You were her investment, her income. Why would she let you go? Let's talk about how this system actually functioned, because municipal brothels weren't chaotic free-for-alls. They were highly regulated, bureaucratic institutions with rules, fees, and hierarchies. First, the city itself profited. Brothel keepers paid annual rent, anywhere from 50 to 100 gold coins depending on the city. They also paid taxes on their earnings. Then there were fines. If a woman broke a rule, she was fined. If a client broke a rule, he was fined. The city collected it all. In England, the most famous example was Southwark, a district just outside London, directly controlled by the Bishop of Winchester. Yes, a bishop. The church, which condemned prostitution as sinful, also ran brothels and collected the profits. The women who worked in Southwark were even called Winchester geese, a nickname that stuck for centuries. The bishop licensed the brothels, taxed them, and enforced regulations. He made a fortune. The hypocrisy was staggering, but no one seemed to care. Brothels were strategically located. They weren't hidden in back alleys. They were near city gates, trade routes, rivers, anywhere travellers and merchants passed through. Accessibility was key. In some cities, they were on streets literally named Rose Street, a euphemism everyone understood. In others, they were clustered near bathhouses, because where there was bathing, there was also sex. The two industries overlapped so much that the word bathhouse became synonymous with brothel. The English called them stews, from the word for a heated bathhouse. Eventually, stew just meant brothel, and everyone knew it. The brothel keeper held immense power. In cities like Vienna, only women could be brothel keepers, appointed and sworn in by the mayor. In other cities, men ran them. Either way, the keeper was essentially a pimp with a government contract. They controlled everything: who worked, who got paid, who got punished, and punishment was brutal. Keepers were allowed to beat the women under their control. It was legal, encouraged even, as a way to maintain discipline. If a woman refused a client, she could be whipped. If she tried to keep money for herself, she could be starved. If she got pregnant, well, that was a problem the keeper would solve, usually with violence. Regulations dictated nearly every aspect of life in the brothel. Operating hours, for instance. Most brothels couldn't open until after dark. The mornings and afternoons were for respectable people. Sex work happened at night, when decent folks weren't looking. Who could visit was also controlled. Single men were welcome. Married men were technically forbidden, though this rule was rarely enforced. Priests and monks were banned. Jews were banned. The reasoning was a mix of morality and prejudice. Priests were supposed to be celibate, and Jews were seen as outsiders who shouldn't mingle with Christian women, even dishonored ones. What you could wear was strictly regulated. Some cities required sex workers to wear yellow veils. Others demanded striped hoods or cloaks with specific colors. The goal was to make you instantly recognizable, so respectable women wouldn't be mistaken for you, and you wouldn't be mistaken for them. In Bolzano, sex workers were forbidden from wearing jewelry. In Florence, they had to wear gloves and bells on their hats. The message was clear. You were marked, labeled, othered. What you could charge was also regulated. Prices were set by the city to keep brothels affordable for common men. A typical visit cost a few pennies, the equivalent of a loaf of bread. You didn't set your price. The keeper did, and you saw almost none of it. The keeper took the majority, sometimes as much as 80 or 90%. What you got barely covered your basic needs, and since the keeper also charged you for food, lodging, and clothing, you ended up deeper in debt with every client you saw. Then there were the rules about what you could and couldn't do sexually. Missionary position only. Anything else, oral, anal, unusual positions, was considered unnatural and could get you punished. Not that clients always followed the rules, and when they didn't, you had no recourse. You couldn't complain. You couldn't refuse. You just had to endure. There were also regulations meant to protect clients. For instance, if you were visibly diseased, you were supposed to be expelled from the brothel. A rule from Southwark stated that no woman with burning disease, likely gonorrhea, could work in the stews, but enforcement was spotty. Many women worked while infected because they had no other way to survive. And besides, how were you supposed to prove you weren't sick when there were no medical exams, no doctors who cared, no one checking? Your first day blurs into your first week. The routine solidifies, grim and unchanging. You wake late in the morning, if you can call it waking. It's more like surfacing from a shallow, restless sleep. The other women are already moving around, some getting dressed, others still lying in their corners, staring at nothing. No one talks much. What is there to say? Breakfast, if there is one, is a piece of hard bread and maybe some watery ale. Gertrude doesn't waste money on feeding you well. You're a tool, not a person. And tools don't need luxury. You spend the morning preparing, bathing, if there's water, which there usually isn't. Mostly, you just wipe yourself down with a rag and hope for the best. You mend your clothes, which are already falling apart. You try to make yourself presentable, though the word feels like a joke. Presentable for what? For men who don't see you as human. Afternoons are for waiting. The brothel doesn't open until evening, so you sit. You talk, sometimes, with the other women. Ilse tells you about her life before this. She was a baker's daughter. Her father died. Her mother couldn't afford to keep her. She ended up here. She's been trying to save money, she says, but it's impossible. Every time she gets close, Gertrude finds a new fee to charge her. Ilse doesn't think she'll ever leave. She says this calmly, like she's talking about the weather. You don't know what to say, so you say nothing. Evening comes. The door opens. The first client walks in. He's a merchant, middle-aged, stinking of ale. Gertrude takes his money and points him toward you. He doesn't ask your name. You don't offer it. You lead him to your curtain. You lie down. He climbs on top of you. It's over in minutes. He leaves. You stare at the ceiling and count the cracks. The second client is younger, rougher. He grabs too hard, bruises your arms. You don't complain. Complaining would get you whipped. The third is drunk, barely able to finish. The fourth is angry about something unrelated to you. but he takes it out on you anyway. By the fifth, you've stopped counting. Your body goes numb. You perform the motions mechanically, a puppet going through scripted movements. You're not present anymore. You've learned to leave yourself, to float somewhere above the straw pallet, detached and distant. It's the only way to survive. When the last client leaves, it's nearly dawn. You wash, sort of, using the bucket of cold water in the corner. You change your shift, which is stiff with sweat and other things you try not to think about. You collapse onto your pallet and close your eyes. Sleep comes fast, but it's not restful. You dream of running, of doors that won't open, of screaming in a language no one understands. You wake a few hours later, and it starts again. The clients are a parade of sameness. Most are labourers, men who work with their hands, their clothes dusted with sawdust or streaked with mud. Some are soldiers, transient and rough, passing through the city on their way to somewhere else. They're loud, aggressive, and often violent. You learn to brace yourself when you see a uniform. Then there are the merchants, slightly wealthier, but no less entitled. They treat the brothel like a tavern, a place to drink, laugh, and use women as entertainment. Some of them are married. You know this because they wear rings, and sometimes they talk about their wives while they're on top of you. The cognitive dissonance is stunning. They preach fidelity and honor during the day, then come here at night. But married men aren't supposed to visit brothels. There's a rule against it. Supposedly, the brothel is for single men only, a release valve for those who can't afford wives. But no one enforces this. Gertrude certainly doesn't care. Money is money. Occasionally, someone unusual walks in. A nobleman slumming it. A priest breaking his vow of celibacy. A traveller from far away, exotic and strange. These clients are memorable, not because they're better, but because they're different. Most of the time, though, the clients blur together. A rotation of faceless men who see you as an object, a receptacle, a thing to be used and discarded. Some are gentle, or as gentle as you can be in a transaction like this. They don't hurt you on purpose. They finish quickly and leave. You almost prefer these. Almost. Others are cruel. They hit, scratch, bite. They force acts that are against the rules, and when you try to protest, they threaten to complain to Gertrude, who will punish you for refusing a client. You're trapped in a system where your body belongs to everyone but you. And then there's disease. Every client is a roll of the dice. Will this one give you something? Will tonight be the night you contract the burning disease, that creeping agony in your groin that means you're infected with gonorrhea? Or will it be worse? Leprosy was a genuine fear in medieval Europe. People believed, not entirely incorrectly, that you could catch it through sexual contact. Prostitutes and their clients were thought to be especially at risk. In some cities, if a sex worker was suspected of having leprosy, she was expelled immediately, not treated, not cared for, just thrown out to die. Syphilis wouldn't arrive in Europe until 1495, but once it did, it spread like wildfire through brothels. The symptoms were horrific: open sores, rotting flesh, madness, death. Many historians believe syphilis contributed to the eventual closure of municipal brothels across Europe. But even before syphilis, there were plenty of other diseases to worry about. Gonorrhea, for one, which caused painful urination, discharge, and if left untreated, pelvic inflammatory disease. Your fallopian tubes would scar, close up, leave you infertile, which, in a twisted way, might be a mercy. The last thing you want is to get pregnant here. You try to prevent it. After every client, you douche with wine or vinegar. Methods passed down from older women who swear it works. It probably doesn't. The acidity might kill some sperm, but not reliably. And the douching itself can cause infections, introducing bacteria into your body. You're trading one risk for another. Despite your efforts, pregnancy happens. When it does, it's a disaster. If you're pregnant, you can't work. If you can't work, you don't earn. If you don't earn, your debt grows. Gertrude has no interest in keeping a pregnant woman around. She's not running a charity, so pregnancies are dealt with quickly and quietly. Abortifacients are common. These are drinks made from herbs, pennyroyal, tansy, rue, things that cause violent cramping and expel the fetus. Sometimes they work, sometimes they kill you instead. The line between abortion and poisoning is thin, and medieval medical knowledge didn't make distinctions. There's a case from Nördlingen in 1471 that became infamous. A woman named Els von Eistedt, who worked in the city brothel, was forced into prostitution after starting as a kitchen maid. She became pregnant. The brothel keeper's partner, a woman named Barbara Taschenweindin, discovered this and was furious. Barbara mixed an abortifacient herself and forced Els to drink it. Els miscarried a male fetus estimated to be about 20 weeks along. The other women in the brothel testified that they saw the fetus, that it was fully formed, that Els nearly died from blood loss. The scandal led to a criminal investigation. All 12 women who worked in the brothel were interrogated. Their testimonies painted a hellish picture of exploitation, violence and cruelty. They described how the brothel keeper, Leinhard Freiermuth, beat them, starved them, and even assaulted clients to prevent the women from earning enough to leave. They talked about Barbara's abuse, her constant threats, her willingness to use violence to maintain control. The town council, unusually, believed them. Barbara and Lienhard were dismissed and banished from the city. Barbara was also branded across the forehead for her role in the forced abortion. It was rare for a brothel keeper to be punished, rarer still for the testimony of prostitutes to be taken seriously. But the forced abortion of a 20-week fetus, that crossed a line even medieval authorities couldn't ignore. The council rewrote the brothel's regulations, adding new protections for the women, but the damage was done. Els von Eistedt, if she survived, was left traumatized, scarred, and still trapped in a system that saw her as expendable. Not all keepers were as brutal as Barbara and Lienhard, but many were close. Violence was an accepted part of the job. If you stepped out of line, you were beaten. If you refused a client, you were beaten. If you complained, you were beaten. The logic was simple. Fear keeps people obedient, and obedience keeps the brothel profitable. One woman in Nördlingen, Adelheid von Sindelfingen, testified that Lienhard had assaulted clients in the brothel, preventing them from finishing so he could keep their money and deny the women their share. It was a sadistic con. He'd provoke a fight, kick the client out, pocket the payment, and then blame the woman for the disruption. She'd lose her earnings and get punished for his violence. This wasn't unique to Nördlingen. Variations of this scam ran in brothels across Europe. Keepers were skilled at finding ways to exploit the women under their control, always staying just within the bounds of what authorities would tolerate. Outside the brothel, violence was even worse. The streets were dangerous, especially at night, and sex workers were seen as fair game. Groups of young men, often from wealthy families, would roam the streets looking for women to assault. They called it sport. In Dijon, as mentioned earlier, there were over 125 documented cases of public rape between 1436 and 1486. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a culture that treated women, especially poor and dishonored women, as disposable. The rapists were rarely punished. If they were from prominent families, they were untouchable. And even if they were caught, the penalties were light. A fine, maybe. Public shame, rarely. Meanwhile, the victim was often forced into a brothel because now she was ruined. The system fed itself. Then there's the physical toll. Your body begins to break down. You're malnourished, exhausted, constantly sick. Your gums bleed because you're not eating enough fresh food, a sign of scurvy. Your teeth loosen and fall out. You develop sores that won't heal. You're covered in bruises, some from clients, some from Gertrude, some you don't even remember getting. Your hair thins. Your skin becomes sallow, stretched tight over bones that jut out more with each passing week. You age a decade in a year. Women who enter the brothel at 16 look 30 by the time they're 20. Those who make it to 30 look 50. The life expectancy here is brutal. Most women don't last more than a few years. Disease, violence, childbirth complications, suicide, any of these can end you. And when you die, you're not mourned. Your body is dumped somewhere outside the city walls, unmarked and forgotten. There's no funeral, no priest to say prayers over your grave. You're buried in unhallowed ground because you died in sin, and sin doesn't deserve Christian burial. You simply disappear. Another woman takes your place. The brothel continues. Nothing changes. The debt system is designed to trap you. It's not an accident. It's not a flaw. It's the entire point. When you arrived, Gertrude told you your debt. Let's say it was 10 gold coins, borrowed by a family member or owed for some other reason. That sounds manageable, right? Work it off, then leave. Except here's how it actually works. You see 5 clients a night. Each one pays 2 pennies. That's 10 pennies total. But Gertrude takes 8. You get 2. Except you don't even get that, because Gertrude also charges you for food, lodging, clothing, candles, firewood, and a dozen other things you didn't ask for. By the end of the week, you've earned nothing. Worse, your debt has grown. Gertrude has added interest. She's added fines for imagined infractions. You talk back. That's a fine. You were slow to answer the door. That's a fine. You looked at her wrong. That's a fine. The numbers are made up, arbitrary, impossible to challenge. You can't read. You can't do math. And even if you could, Gertrude keeps the books, and she's the only one who sees them. You're working, constantly, and your debt only grows. It's a treadmill designed to keep you running until you collapse. And if you try to save money, if you manage to hide a few coins, and Gertrude finds out, you're accused of theft. Theft from her, because technically, all the money belongs to her. You're whipped. The coins are confiscated. Your debt increases to cover the cost of your punishment. It's a closed loop. There's no exit. A few women, a very few, do manage to scrape together enough for a dowry. The fantasy is that with a dowry, you can marry, return to respectability, start over. This is the Mary Magdalene story, the reformed prostitute redeemed through marriage and faith. And it does happen, occasionally. But the odds are astronomical. You'd have to work for years without getting sick, without getting pregnant, without dying. You'd have to avoid the worst of the violence. You'd have to somehow save money despite the debt trap. And even if you managed all that, you'd still need to find a man willing to marry a former sex worker. Most men won't. The stigma is permanent. Let's talk about that stigma, because it's suffocating. You're marked, literally and figuratively. The striped hood you wear announces to everyone what you are. Respectable women cross the street to avoid you. Merchants won't sell to you unless you pay extra. Priests preach about your sinfulness from the pulpit. You're the embodiment of lust, of temptation, of everything wrong with female sexuality. Never mind that the men who visit you are also sinning. Never mind that the city profits from your exploitation. You're the scapegoat. There are streets you're not allowed to walk on, areas you're forbidden from entering. In some cities, you can't go near churches or markets during certain hours. If you break these rules, you're fined or beaten. The message is clear. Stay in your lane. Don't contaminate respectable society with your presence. And yet, paradoxically, you're sometimes forced to participate in public events. In some German cities, sex workers were required to attend weddings where they'd be put on display, laughed at, mocked. They were entertainment, a reminder to everyone else of what not to become. In Lyon, France, sex workers participated in municipal processions and festivals, paraded through the streets as part of the civic spectacle. It was humiliating, but it was also mandatory. Refuse, and you'd be punished. The psychological weight of all this is crushing. You're told every day that you're worthless, sinful, subhuman. And eventually, you start to believe it. Your sense of self erodes. You forget who you were before this. You forget that you had dreams, hopes, a name that wasn't just common woman or whore. You become what they say you are. And that, maybe, is the worst part. Not the violence or the disease or the debt. It's the way this place strips you of your humanity, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but a shell going through the motions. But you're not broken yet. Not completely. And neither are the other women. There's resistance here, small and fragile, but real. Ilse talks sometimes about running away. She doesn't mean it, probably, but the fancy keeps her sane. She imagines walking out one night and never coming back, traveling to a city where no one knows her, starting over. You don't tell her it's impossible. Let her have the dream. Other women resist in quieter ways. They steal food from Gertrude's storeroom. They sabotage the brothel's reputation by being intentionally unpleasant to clients, making sure word spreads that this isn't a fun place to visit. They gossip, sharing information about which clients are violent, which keepers are cruel, which cities have better conditions. It's a network, informal and fragile, but it exists. In France, there were cases of sex workers organizing collectively. When a male brothel keeper replaced a female one, the women protested. They knew male keepers were often more brutal. When clandestine sex workers, those operating illegally outside the brothel, started stealing clients, the licensed women banded together to complain to authorities. They didn't have much power, but they used what little they had. The Nördlingen case is another example of resistance. Those 12 women could have stayed silent. They could have protected their keeper out of fear or loyalty or learned helplessness. Instead, they testified. They told the truth, knowing it might cost them everything. And in that case, astonishingly, they won. The keeper was punished. The regulations were rewritten. It didn't fix the system, but it was something. A crack in the facade. Proof that even in the darkest places, people fight back. There were also Magdalene homes, institutions designed to reform former prostitutes. The idea was that a woman could enter one of these homes, spend 2 years learning a trade like spinning or weaving, and then leave, cleansed of her past. In theory, it was a path to redemption. In practice, it was complicated. The homes were run by religious orders, and the women who entered were expected to perform endless penance. They worked long hours for little pay. They were treated as sinners in need of salvation, constantly reminded of their past shame. Some women thrived there, grateful for the structure and the chance to escape. Others found it just another form of imprisonment. and many never made it in. You had to prove you'd been a prostitute, which meant having records, testimonies, something official. If you'd worked clandestinely, you had no proof. If you'd been trafficked and never registered, you didn't qualify. The system was exclusionary by design. Eventually, women who hadn't been prostitutes started trying to get into Magdalene homes because even the harsh conditions there were better than life on the streets. Authorities had to start requiring proof of former sex work just to keep out the desperate poor who saw it as their only option. That tells you something about medieval society. A place designed to reform prostitutes became so desirable that non-prostitutes wanted in. What does that say about the alternatives? In rare cases, women did escape through marriage. There are records of former sex workers marrying and returning to respectability. It happened. But for every success story, there were 1,000 failures. Women who died in the brothel. Women who were expelled for being too sick or too old and ended up begging on the streets. Women who simply disappeared, their fates unknown. The fantasy of redemption was just that, a fantasy. Most women never got out, and even those who did carried the scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of their lives. You lie awake one night, listening to Ilse cry softly in the corner. You think about your life before this. It feels like a dream, distant and unreal. You can't remember your mother's face clearly anymore. You can't remember the last time you felt safe. You wonder if you'll die here. Probably. You wonder if anyone will remember you. Probably not. But you're still here, still breathing, still surviving. And for now, that's enough. The system that created all this misery didn't last forever. By the early 1500s, cracks were forming. The Protestant Reformation, which began in 1517, with Martin Luther nailing his theses to a church door, upended medieval Europe. And one of its targets was prostitution. Luther condemned sex work in terms that made no room for the necessary evil argument. Prostitutes, he declared, were sinful and deserving of death. Marriage, he argued, was a gift from God, a sacred bond that elevated sexual relations above base fornication. Adultery and prostitution were abominations. The Catholic Church, not wanting to be outdone by Protestant piety, followed suit. Church leaders who had once profited from brothels suddenly grew uneasy. The moral compromise required to sustain legal prostitution was becoming untenable in the new religious climate. Cities began closing their municipal brothels. Augsburg shut down its brothel in 1532. Basel followed in 1534. Frankfurt in 1560. Across Germany, France, and eventually Spain, the institutions that had been a staple of urban life for 2 centuries were dismantled. In England, Henry VIII ordered the closure of the Southwark stews in 1546, ending the Bishop of Winchester's lucrative side business. The justifications varied. Some leaders blamed syphilis, which had ravaged Europe since its arrival in 1495. Others cited moral decay, but the common thread was religious reform. The Reformation's emphasis on sin, purity, and divine judgment made it impossible to continue justifying prostitution as a public service. Of course, closing the brothels didn't eliminate prostitution. It just pushed it underground. Women who had worked in licensed brothels were suddenly criminal. They scattered into hidden locations, operating in secret, more vulnerable than ever. Without regulation, there was no protection, no oversight, no recourse. Violence increased. Exploitation worsened. The women who had been trapped in municipal brothels found themselves in an even more dangerous, marginalized existence. By the mid-1500s, the era of legal, regulated prostitution in medieval Europe was over. But the sex trade continued, as it always does. The difference was that now, instead of being a necessary evil, it was simply evil. And the women who worked in it were criminals, hunted by authorities and despised by society. The women whose stories we've been following, their fates are mostly unknown. Ilse, Els von Eistedt, the others, they vanished into history, their names surviving only in court records and city archives. They were real people. They had families, dreams, fears. They laughed, cried, hoped, despaired. But to medieval society, they were just entries in a ledger, bodies to be used and discarded. We don't know if Ilse ever escaped. We don't know if Els von Eistedt survived the forced abortion and lived to see another day. We don't know how many women died in those brothels, how many were buried in unmarked graves, how many simply ceased to exist without anyone noticing or caring. What we do know is that the system was brutal. It was designed to extract labor, sexual and otherwise, from the most vulnerable people in society. It dressed itself up in legal language, in arguments about civic order and moral necessity. But at its core, it was exploitation, pure and simple. And it's important to remember that, because the impulse behind that system, the desire to control, commodify and stigmatize certain bodies while profiting from them, that impulse didn't die with the Reformation. It evolved, it took new forms, but it didn't disappear. Even today, sex work exists in a grey zone of legality, exploitation, and societal judgment. Workers face violence, stigma, and legal consequences that clients rarely do. The same patterns repeat. The same power imbalances persist. Medieval brothels are gone, but the structures that enabled them, poverty, inequality, gendered violence, those remain. So when we look back at these women, at their suffering and their resistance, we're not just studying the past, we're confronting uncomfortable truths about the present. Tonight, as you drift off, think about the women who lived these lives, not as statistics or cautionary tales, but as people. Remember that they survived, however briefly, in a world that wanted to erase them. Remember that they testified, resisted, dreamed of escape. Remember their names when you can. Els von Eistedt, Adelheid von Sindelfingen, Ilse. So many others lost to time. They deserved better. They deserved safety, autonomy, dignity. They didn't get it. But their stories matter. And by listening, by remembering, we ensure they're not completely forgotten. If you made it this far, thank you. If this helped you understand a piece of history you didn't know before, or if it just helped you fall asleep, I'm glad. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. Now close your eyes. Let the weight of the day fall away. These stories are heavy, but you don't have to carry them into your dreams. Rest now. Tomorrow is another day. And unlike those women, you have choices. You have freedom. You have a future. Hold on to that. Good night. The market square stinks. Not just the usual medieval stench of horse manure and unwashed bodies, but something sharper today. Fear, maybe. Desperation. You're standing near a vegetable cart, trying to look inconspicuous, when you feel eyes on you. Not the casual glance of a passerby, but the assessing stare of someone who sees value in what others overlook. Your hand trembles slightly as you reach for a bruised apple. The tremor's been there since birth. A nervous twitch that makes fine motor control nearly impossible. Your parents used to say it was God's mark, though they never clarified whether that was blessing or curse. The nobleman approaching you seems to have decided. He's dressed in deep burgundy velvet, gold thread catching the pale morning light. His boots are cleaner than any surface you've touched in weeks. When he speaks, his voice carries the particular confidence of someone who's never been told no. You there, the one with the shaking hands. You don't run. Running implies you have somewhere better to be. Instead, you turn, apple still clutched in your unreliable grip, and meet his gaze. He's smiling, but it's the smile of a man who's just found a tool he didn't know he needed. Can you make people laugh? The question hangs in the air like smoke. You want to say no. You want to tell him you're just trying to buy breakfast, that you're no one special, that there's been a mistake, but your stomach's been empty for 2 days, and his smile promises something worse than starvation if you refuse. Sometimes you manage. Your voice sounds small, good enough. He tosses a coin to the apple seller without looking, grabs your arm with fingers that feel like iron, and begins walking. You stumble after him, apple forgotten, life as you knew it evaporating with each step away from the market. This is how it begins for most, not with auditions or applications, but with being noticed for all the wrong reasons. Maybe it's a physical difference, a club foot or crooked spine. Maybe it's a sharp tongue that got you in trouble one too many times. Maybe you're just desperately poor, and someone offers you 3 meals a day in exchange for your dignity. The reasons vary, the outcome doesn't. You're going to become a jester, and you're going to wish you'd run. The nobleman, you learn, is called Lord Ashford. He serves at the court of a minor earl, whose name you'll spend the next 3 days trying to remember and pronounce. The journey to the estate takes most of the afternoon, your legs aching from trying to match his horse's pace. He doesn't offer you a ride. Jesters walk. When you finally arrive, the castle isn't what you expected. No soaring towers or gleaming white stone. This is a practical fortress, grey and squat, built to withstand sieges rather than impress visitors. The courtyard smells like wet stone and horses. Chickens scatter as you pass. This isn't Camelot. This is just another place where powerful people need entertaining. Lord Ashford hands you off to a man named Godfrey, the steward, whose expression suggests he's deeply unimpressed with the Lord's latest acquisition. Godfrey looks you up and down, notes the trembling hands, the threadbare clothes, the way you can't quite make eye contact, and sighs like a man who's seen this play out too many times. Another one, he mutters. Right, follow me. You're led through a series of increasingly dim corridors until you reach a small room that smells of mildew and old straw. There are 2 other people here, a boy, maybe 14, with a twisted spine that makes him walk sideways, and a woman, older, with a face marked by burns that have healed into pale, rigid scars. They both look up as you enter. Neither smiles. Your quarters, Godfrey announces. You'll share. The Earl expects a performance tomorrow evening. Prepare accordingly. He leaves before you can ask what that means. The woman speaks first. Her voice is surprisingly gentle. What's your talent? I don't have one. Then you better find one fast. She gestures to a pile of clothing in the corner. The costume's over there. Put it on. Get used to it. You'll be wearing it every day for the rest of your life. You approach the pile like it might bite. The fabric is rough wool, dyed in clashing colours that hurt to look at. Bright yellows, aggressive reds, jarring greens. There are bells sewn into the seams. The hat, God, the hat. 3 points, each topped with a jingling bell and a tuft of scraggly feathers. It's designed to make you look ridiculous. It succeeds. Why, you ask, holding up the monstrosity. The boy with the twisted spine laughs, sharp and bitter. Because that's the point. You're not a person anymore. You're a fool, and fools don't get to look human. You dress slowly, each piece feeling like a betrayal of whoever you used to be. The woman watches without judgment, while the boy busies himself with a wooden club wrapped in bells. He's practicing juggling, you realize, over and over, catching and throwing with a precision that speaks of countless hours of repetition. How long have you been here? You ask him. 2 years. And you? The woman considers the question. 6 years, maybe 7, lost count. Can you leave? She smiles sadly. Where would we go? That night, you lie awake on your straw mat, the bells on your costume jingling with every small movement. The woman, whose name is Maud, tells you about the Earl. He's unpredictable, she says. Kind one moment, vicious the next. He likes jokes, but not at his expense. He appreciates cleverness, but despises being outsmarted. He's generous with coin when pleased, and equally generous with his fists when not. The last jester, she says quietly, told a joke about the Earl's weight. Wrong joke, wrong day. They found him in the river 3 days later. You want to ask if she's exaggerating. The look on her face tells you she's not. The boy, Edmund, adds his own advice. Watch the room. If the nobles are laughing, you're safe. If they're silent, you've already failed. And if the Earl stands up during your performance, duck. Duck? He throws things. Sleep doesn't come easy. When it finally does, you dream of markets and apples and choices you can't take back. Morning arrives too soon, announced by bells. Not your costume bells, but the chapel bells calling the castle to prayer. You're not invited. Jesters don't pray with nobles. You eat in the servants' hall, a draughty room where the kitchen staff eyes you with a mixture of pity and contempt. The food is better than anything you've had in weeks. Thick porridge and actual bread, but it sits heavy in your stomach. Godfrey finds you after breakfast. The Earl wants to meet you. Follow me. And for God's sake, try to be amusing. The Earl's chamber is warm, a fire crackling in a hearth large enough to roast a pig. Tapestries cover the walls, depicting hunting scenes and battles. The Earl himself is younger than you expected, maybe 30, with a face that might be handsome, if not for the permanent sneer. He looks up from a letter as you enter. This is the new one. Yes, my lord, Godfrey confirms. The Earl waves dismissively. Let's see what you can do. Make me laugh. Your mind goes blank, completely, utterly blank. You stand there, costume bells jingling from your nervous trembling, mouth opening and closing like a fish. The Earl's expression shifts from curious to bored to dangerous in the span of 3 heartbeats. Nothing. You have nothing. Panic gives you a terrible idea. You drop to your hands and knees and bark like a dog. It's humiliating. It's pathetic. It's the only thing you can think of. The Earl stares. Then, inexplicably, he laughs. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, surprised bark of laughter that echoes off the stone walls. A fool who knows he's a fool, he says, still grinning. I like that. Do it again. You bark again. He laughs harder. You've just learned your first lesson as a jester. Dignity is the first thing you sacrifice. It won't be the last. Over the following days, you begin to understand the machinery of your new life. There's no schedule, no set hours, just the constant state of being available. The Earl might summon you at dawn or midnight. He might want an hour of entertainment or 30 seconds. Your job is to be ready, always, and to read his mood accurately enough to survive. Maud teaches you the basics. Simple juggling with cloth balls, not yet wood or knives. A few stock jokes that are old enough to be safe. The art of the pratfall. How to throw yourself to the ground without actually injuring yourself. Physical comedy, she explains, is your friend. It requires no wit, just a willingness to hurt. Edmund shows you the musical instruments kept in a chest in your shared room. A small drum, a wooden flute, a stringed lyre with 3 broken strings. Learn something, he advises. Anything. The Earl gets bored easily. You need options. You choose the drum. It's simple. Even with shaking hands, you can manage a basic rhythm. You practice at night, quietly, the soft thuds mixing with the snores of your roommates. Each beat feels like hammering another nail into the coffin of who you used to be. The days blur together, each one a repetition of the last with small variations in humiliation. You're not allowed to eat with the nobles, but you're expected to perform during their meals, dodging thrown food and trying to make scripted comedy seem spontaneous. You're not permitted in the chapel, but you're required to mock the visiting priest with just enough irreverence to amuse without committing blasphemy. You learn the invisible rules. Don't touch the nobles unless specifically invited. Don't speak to the ladies of the court unless performing. Don't sit in the Earl's presence. Don't eat before he does. Don't laugh at your own jokes. Don't cry, ever, no matter how much something hurts. One evening, during a feast, the Earl is in a particularly good mood. He's drunk, which could go either way. You're performing your dog routine, which has inexplicably become his favourite, when he suddenly stands and throws a leg of mutton at your head. You duck, barely, and it crashes into the wall behind you, leaving a greasy smear. The hall goes silent. Then the Earl roars with laughter and everyone joins in, the sound washing over you like a wave. You realise he wasn't angry. He was testing your reflexes. This is entertainment for him. You retrieve the mutton, hold it up, and take a large, exaggerated bite. More laughter. You've passed another test. Edmund was right. Always be watching. Always be ready. That night, lying in the dark, you count your bruises. 7. From various impacts and falls. Your ribs ache. Your jaw is sore from forced smiling. You've been here less than 2 weeks, and you already understand what Maud meant. Where would you go? You become something that doesn't exist outside these walls. The costume helps, or maybe it doesn't. Every morning you put on the motley, the ridiculous colours and jangling bells, and you feel yourself disappearing a little more. The bright fabric is intentional, Maud explained. It marks you as separate, other, not quite human. When nobles see you coming, they see the costume first, the person never. The 3-pointed hat is the worst. Each point represents something, though the symbolism has been lost to time, and nobody remembers what. What matters is that it's impossible to forget you're wearing it. The bells chime with every movement, announcing your presence, making stealth impossible. You are always visible, always audible, always performing. Some jesters, Edmund tells you, get to wear normal clothes. The intelligent ones, the valued ones, the court favourites who've earned enough respect to be seen as advisors rather than amusing animals. You're not there yet. You might never be. The shaving happens on your 3rd week. Godfrey appears at dawn with a razor and a bowl of soapy water. Orders, he says simply. You sit still while he removes your hair, the blade scraping against your scalp. It's an identifier, another way to mark you as different. Natural fools got shaved heads. Licensed fools kept their hair. The distinction matters to the court, apparently. To you, it just feels like one more indignity. The cold is worse now. Your head loses heat quickly, and the stone corridors of the castle are always freezing. You try wearing a cap underneath the fool's hat, but the Earl notices and makes you remove it. The look is important, he says. as if aesthetic concerns outweigh your comfort. You catch your reflection one day in a polished metal shield hanging in the armory. You don't recognize yourself. The costume, the bare head, the permanent anxious expression. You've been transformed into exactly what they wanted. A fool, a thing to laugh at, a creature whose suffering is entertaining. The worst part isn't the outfit or the cold or the bells. It's the way people look at you now, or rather, how they don't. Nobles glance past you like you're furniture. Servants avoid eye contact, as if your condition might be contagious. Children point and giggle. You've become invisible and hypervisible at the same time, seen but not acknowledged as fully human. Only the other jesters treat you normally, and even that's complicated by competition. There are 3 of you now, serving 1 earl. That's too many. Everyone knows it. Edmund's juggling is better than yours. Maud's storytelling is legendary. What do you bring to the table besides the ability to bark and beat a drum? You need something unique, something only you can do. So you start studying the earl. His patterns, his preferences, his triggers. You notice he laughs hardest at jokes that punch down, at humor that mocks the weak or unfortunate. You notice he values cleverness, but only when he feels included in the joke. You notice his mood shifts based on letters from court, on the phases of the moon, on whether his wife has smiled at him that morning. You become a student of one man's psychology because your life depends on it. And slowly, carefully, you begin to understand how to survive. The earl summons you alone one morning, which has never happened before. Your stomach drops. Private audiences rarely mean good things for jesters. You enter his chamber expecting the worst. He's sitting at his desk, quill in hand, and gestures for you to close the door. I have a task for you. Not a performance, a task. You wait. My brother visits next week. He's a pompous ass who thinks himself cleverer than everyone. I want you to mock him, subtly. Make him look foolish without making it obvious you're doing it on purpose. This is a test, a dangerous one. Mock a noble too gently and you fail to amuse. Mock them too harshly and you've made an enemy. And this isn't just any noble. This is the Earl's brother. I'll do my best, my lord. See that you do. He returns to his letter. You're dismissed. You spend the next week in a state of controlled panic, crafting material with Maud's help. She's done this before, she says. The key is to use stories and metaphors, to tell tales about hypothetical people that happen to perfectly describe the target. That way, if accused, you can claim innocence. You weren't mocking Lord Robert. You were just telling a story about a fictional pompous ass. Lord Robert arrives with an entourage of 15 people, all dressed in finery that makes the Earl's court look provincial. He's tall, handsome, in the way that suggests he's never known hardship, and he speaks in a booming voice designed to command attention. That night's feast is tense. The brothers sit side by side, trading barbs disguised as pleasantries. You're called to perform halfway through the meal. You tell a story about a peacock who believed himself to be a phoenix. The peacock strutted and preened, convinced that his beautiful tail feathers meant he could rise from ashes. But when real fire came, he learned that beauty and power are not the same thing. The peacock burned, while the chickens, who never claimed to be special, survived to lay eggs another day. The hall is silent when you finish. Lord Robert's face has gone red. You've just called him a delusional peacock while his servants are the practical chickens. Then the Earl laughs, loud and long, and because he laughs, everyone else does too. Even Lord Robert, though his eyes promise violence. You've succeeded. You've also made an enemy. That night, One of Lord Robert's men corners you in a hallway. He doesn't say anything, just grabs your head and slams it into the stone wall once, hard enough to make lights dance behind your eyes. When he releases you, you collapse to the floor, tasting blood. "Careful with your stories, fool," he says, and walks away. You lie there for a while, checking your teeth with your tongue, all present. Your head throbs with a pain that promises to last for days, but you kept your teeth and you pleased the Earl. In the brutal arithmetic of jester life, that's a win. Maud finds you eventually and helps you back to your room. She cleans the cut on your scalp without comment. She's seen this before. She'll see it again. Was it worth it? You ask, mostly to yourself. Does it matter? The answer, you're learning, is always no. Days become weeks, become months. You settle into a rhythm, if such a word can describe chaos. Every morning is different, but the underlying structure never changes. You wake before dawn. You put on the costume. You wait to be summoned. You perform. You endure. You survive. The performances themselves become almost routine, though they never stop being terrifying. The Earl wants magic tricks, so you learn sleight of hand from a travelling performer who stops at the castle. The Earl wants songs, so you memorize ballads until your throat is raw. The Earl wants acrobatics, so you practice flips until you can land them without breaking bones most of the time. Your body accumulates injuries like a wall accumulates cracks. A twisted ankle that never quite heals right. Bruised ribs from a fall. Scars from cuts that got infected. None of it is treated. There's no physician for jesters. You either recover or you don't. The mental toll is harder to quantify. You catch yourself rehearsing jokes in your sleep, your brain unable to shut off even in dreams. You develop a nervous habit of laughing at inappropriate times, your face stuck in performance mode. You forget what it felt like to be genuinely happy, as opposed to performance happy. Edmund disappears one night. No goodbye, no explanation. Godfrey announces the next morning that he's been dismissed. "Found him crying," the steward says with disgust. "Can't have that. The Earl doesn't pay jesters to be sad. You don't ask where Edmund went. You don't want to know." A new jester arrives to replace him. A woman named Alice, who can walk on her hands and juggle with her feet. She's younger than you, maybe 17, and she still has hope in her eyes. You remember having that. It seems like a different lifetime. Alice learns quickly what you learn slowly. The Earl's preferences, the unspoken rules, the fine line between amusing and insulting. She's good at the physical comedy, better than Edmund ever was. You feel the cold wind of replacement at your back, so you adapt. You focus on your niche. Storytelling and political satire disguised as innocent tales. You become the jester who can make complicated ideas simple and simple ideas complicated. You earn your place through words rather than flips, but you're always aware of how tenuous your position is. One bad performance, one joke that lands wrong, one day when the Earl wakes up in a foul mood and decides he's tired of your face. That's all it would take. The fear is constant, a low-level hum of anxiety that never fully goes away. Even on good days, when the Earl is generous and the court is laughing, you're aware that it could all end in an instant. Your continued existence depends entirely on the whims of people who view you as disposable entertainment. And maybe that's the worst part, not the physical pain or the humiliation or the exhaustion. It's knowing that your life has no inherent value. You matter only as much as you're able to amuse. The moment you stop being funny, you stop being anything at all. One afternoon, Godfrey pulls you aside. The Earl has a message he needs delivered. Your blood turns to ice. Message delivery. This is the job nobody wants. Where? The border village of Thornfield. 3 days' ride. You'll carry a sealed letter to the village headman. Alone? Alone. This is both punishment and test. Jesters are sometimes used as messengers because they're mobile, expendable, and nobody takes them seriously enough to interrogate properly. But it's dangerous work. Roads are full of bandits. Messages often contain bad news, and if the recipient doesn't like what they read, jesters are convenient targets for their anger. You leave the next morning with nothing but the letter, 3 days' worth of stale bread, and your fool's costume. The bright colors make you a target, but removing them would be insubordination. You're required to look ridiculous even in danger. The journey is long and lonely. You're not accustomed to riding, and the horse, sensing your incompetence, does its best to make you miserable. Your inner thighs develop blisters that burst and sting. Your back aches from the unfamiliar posture. The bells on your costume jingle with every step, announcing your presence to anyone within hearing distance. On the second day, you're stopped by 3 men who appear from the tree line like wolves materializing from shadows. They're dressed in mismatched armor, clearly brigands or displaced soldiers. One carries a sword that's seen heavy use. They're not laughing. What's this then? The leader, a man with a scar bisecting his nose, approaches. A fool. On the road. Strange times. You try to make your voice steady. Just a messenger, sirs, carrying a letter for the Earl. A letter? He grins, showing missing teeth. Could be valuable. Could be worth something. It's just boring court business. Trade agreements. Boring stuff. Then you won't mind if we take a look. They search you roughly, finding the letter. The leader breaks the seal and squints at the writing. He can't read. None of them can. After a moment he crumples it and tosses it aside. Nothing valuable, but that horse. He eyes your mount with clear intent. You make a decision. You drop to your hands and knees and bark, loud and genuine, channeling every ounce of absurdity you've learned. Then you chase your own tail in a circle, bells jangling, before collapsing and playing dead. The brigands stare. Then, one by one, they start laughing. The leader shakes his head in disbelief. You're mad. Completely mad. Go on, get out of here before I change my mind. You scramble back onto the horse, retrieve the crumpled letter, and ride away without looking back. Your hands are shaking so badly you can barely hold the reins. You've just survived through sheer stupidity, by being so pathetic that even brigands couldn't bring themselves to kill you. When you finally reach Thornfield, the headman reads the letter, and his face goes white. It's eviction notices for 3 families who couldn't pay their taxes. He looks at you with such hatred that you instinctively step back. You brought this? I'm just the messenger, sir. You're a fool. Both meanings apply. You know this. He knows this. The families being evicted will know this when they're thrown out of their homes in winter. The headman doesn't hit you, but his silence is somehow worse. You ride back to the castle with the knowledge that you've contributed to suffering, that your actions have consequences beyond just making people laugh or fail to laugh. When you return and deliver the headman's written response, the Earl doesn't ask about your journey. He doesn't care that you were nearly robbed or that you delivered devastating news or that you haven't slept properly in 5 days. He just nods and dismisses you. You've successfully delivered a message. You're alive. That's the entirety of your reward. That night, you can't sleep. The faces of the brigands, the hatred in the headman's eyes, the knowledge of families being displaced. It churns in your mind like spoiled meat in your gut. Maud notices your distress but says nothing. What would she say? This is the job. This is what you signed up for, or rather, what was signed up for you. You realize that being a jester isn't just about performance. It's about being a tool, an instrument of power and cruelty, wrapped in bells and bright colors so nobody notices the blade. The weeks following the message delivery pass in a haze. You're stuck in your own head more than usual, going through the motions of performances without really being present. The Earl notices, commenting that you seem off, but he doesn't care enough to investigate. As long as you make him laugh, your internal state is irrelevant. Winter arrives, and with it, the cold that seeps into every corner of the castle. Your shared room has no fireplace, just a small brazier that barely takes the edge off the freezing air. You sleep in your costume because it's warmer than your underclothes. Your bare scalp loses heat so quickly that you wake with headaches that last all morning. The physical discomfort is matched by a growing sense of unreality. You've been here long enough now that your previous life has started to feel like a dream. Did you really once live in a small cottage? Did you have friends, a family, a name that wasn't synonymous with fool? The memories are there, but they're fading, like writing slowly erased by rain. Alice, the new jester, adapts faster than you did. Within months, she's perfected her routine and earned the Earl's favor. She's young enough to still have energy for elaborate acrobatics, and pretty enough that the nobles enjoy watching her, even when she fails. You're neither young nor pretty, which means your margin for error shrinks daily. One evening, the Earl hosts a grand feast for a visiting duke. The main hall is packed with nobles from across the region, all dressed in their finest. You're expected to perform your best material. No pressure. You start with a story about two merchants arguing over which one is wealthier. It's a safe choice, a tale with an obvious moral that doesn't offend anyone. The room politely chuckles. Not great, but not bad. Then Alice does a backflip while juggling flaming torches. The room erupts in applause. You're losing. You can feel it. The attention shifting, the Earl's interest waning. You need something bigger, riskier. Against your better judgment, you launch into a political satire about corrupt tax collectors. It's funny, sharp, well-crafted. It's also dangerous, because several of the nobles in the room are tax collectors. The laughter that follows is nervous, uncertain. The Earl's face is unreadable. You've crossed a line, maybe. Or maybe you haven't. The ambiguity is suffocating. Later, after the feast, the Earl summons you. Your heart sinks. That joke about tax collectors, he says slowly. Yes, my lord. Duke Thornbury didn't appreciate it. He collects taxes for the crown. I apologize, my lord. I didn't mean... Shut up. He stands towering over you. For a moment, you're certain he's going to strike you. Instead, he laughs. It was hilarious. Duke Thornbury is a pompous ass. I enjoyed watching him squirm. Relief floods through you so intensely you nearly collapse. But, the Earl continues, next time, warn me first. I like to be prepared when you're going to humiliate my guests. Yes, my lord. Of course. You've dodged execution by pure chance. The Earl happened to dislike the target of your joke. If he'd liked Duke Thornbury, you'd be facing punishment right now. This is what jester's privilege looks like. The illusion of freedom to speak, bounded by invisible lines that shift without warning. You're learning to live in that uncertainty, to make peace with never knowing if today is the day you finally push too far. As winter deepens, you fall ill. Not seriously, just a persistent cough and fever that makes your bones ache. There's no time off for illness, The Earl still expects performances, so you perform while shivering, while feeling like your head is stuffed with wool, while fighting the urge to collapse. Maud makes you tea from herbs she grows in pots on the windowsill. It helps a little, but mostly you just endure. Rest is a luxury you can't afford. During one particularly bad night, you wake up coughing so hard you taste blood. Alice stirs in her sleep, but doesn't wake. Maud does, though. She sits up and watches you in the dim light. "You should leave," she says quietly. "What?" "While you're young enough to still have options, before this place completely breaks you." "Where would I go?" "I don't know. Anywhere. Be a traveling performer. Beg on streets. Anything is better than this." You want to believe her, but you can't. The costume has become your skin. The role has consumed whoever you used to be. And more importantly, you're terrified of what life would look like outside these walls. At least here, you have food and shelter. Out there, you'd have nothing but the clothes on your back and a reputation as a fool. "I can't," you admit. Maud nods like she expected that answer. "Then you'd better toughen up, because it gets worse before it gets worse." She rolls over and goes back to sleep. You lie awake, coughing occasionally, wondering if there's any truth to the idea that it gets better. You're starting to suspect there isn't. By spring, you've been at the castle for over a year. You've survived longer than Edmund, which feels like an accomplishment even though it shouldn't. You've learned to anticipate the Earl's moods, to read the room, to know when to push and when to retreat. You've become competent at your job, which is a strange thing to feel proud of. But competence doesn't equal safety. The Earl's favour is a fickle thing, easily given and easily revoked. You've seen other servants dismissed for minor infractions. You've watched as a kitchen maid was whipped for burning bread. You know that jesters are no exception to the castle's casual cruelty. One morning, you wake to find Maud gone. Not dismissed, not dead, just gone. Her few possessions are missing. She left in the night without saying goodbye. Alice looks as confused as you feel. Where did she go? You have no idea, but you hope desperately that wherever she is, it's better than here. Maybe she took her own advice. Maybe she found a way out while she still could. Or maybe she's dead in a ditch somewhere, and you'll never know. With Maud gone, you're the senior jester now. It's not a promotion. There's no pay increase, no additional respect. But Alice looks to you for guidance the way you once looked to Maud, and that terrifies you. You're barely holding yourself together. How are you supposed to help someone else? You try anyway. You teach her the things Maud taught you. How to read the room. How to make criticism sound like jest. How to fall without hurting yourself. How to eat just enough to stay functional, but not so much that you get sluggish. Small mercies and survival skills. She listens attentively, and you see in her eyes the same fear you felt when you started. She's realized what you realized. There's no way out. Not really. The costume is a cage that goes with you everywhere. The Earl announces he's hosting a tournament. This means weeks of extra work as the castle prepares for an influx of nobles and knights. It also means you'll be expected to perform constantly, entertaining guests from dawn until well past dark. The tournament itself is brutal and boring in equal measure. Armoured men hitting each other with lances while crowds cheer. You're required to provide commentary between jousts, filling the silence with jokes and observations that nobody really listens to. They're here for the violence, not the jester. During one particularly dull match, you notice a knight in the stands watching you instead of the field. He's youngish, maybe 25, with the kind of clean-shaven face that suggests he's never been in real combat. When your eyes meet, he smiles. After your performance, he approaches. You're quite talented. Thank you, my lord. I'm looking for entertainment for my own household. Would you be interested in a position? For one wild moment, you consider saying yes. A new master, a fresh start, maybe better treatment. Then reality reasserts itself. You're the Earl's property. You can't just leave. And even if you could, there's no guarantee the new position would be any better. Different cruelties, same cage. I'm honored, my lord, but I serve the Earl. He nods, disappointed but not surprised. A pity. Well, if you ever change your mind. He hands you a small coin, a tip, more money than you've seen in months. You pocket it carefully, aware that Godfrey will demand a portion for administrative purposes. But even half a coin is wealth to you. That night, you lie awake thinking about the offer, not seriously considering it, but imagining what might have been. A different castle, different nobles, different rules. Would it be better? Would it be worse? Does it even matter when the fundamental situation remains the same? Your property. The illusion of choice is just that, an illusion. The tournament concludes with a grand feast, where you're expected to perform your final routine. You've prepared something elaborate, a story with characters and voices, comedy and pathos. You've spent weeks perfecting it. 5 minutes before you're called to perform, the Earl summons you to his chamber. He's drunk, you can tell immediately, and in a foul mood. One of his knights lost in the final joust, embarrassing him in front of his guests. I need you to do something, he says, words slightly slurred. That pompous knight from Derbyshire, the one who won the tournament. Mock him, destroy him, make him look like a fool. My lord, I have a prepared routine. I don't care. Change it. Mock him. That's an order. You have minutes to completely restructure your performance, to find weaknesses in a man you've barely observed, to create mockery that's savage enough to satisfy the Earl, but subtle enough to avoid crossing into obvious insult. You do your best. You tell a story about a knight who is so concerned with his appearance that he polishes his armor until it blinds him. And thus, he wins tournaments by accident, his opponents unable to see through the glare. It's clever, it's cutting, it's not enough. The Earl's face remains stony throughout your performance. When you finish, the silence is deafening. You failed. That night, you're summoned again. The Earl is even drunker now, and his mood has curdled into something vicious. He doesn't say anything, just nods to Godfrey. The steward grabs your arm and hauls you to the courtyard. It's empty, dark, cold. You know what's coming before you see the post. They strip off your costume and tie you to the whipping post. The leather bites into your wrists. You hear the whistle of the whip before you feel it. A sharp crack followed by a line of fire across your back. 1 lash, 2, 3. You lose count somewhere around 7. The world narrows to pain and the taste of blood, where you've bitten your tongue. When they finally cut you down, you collapse onto the cold stones. Someone throws your costume at you. You're expected to put it back on, to return to your room, to be ready to perform tomorrow as if nothing happened. Alice helps you back. She doesn't speak, just supports your weight as you stumble through corridors that seem to stretch forever. In your room, she helps you clean the wounds as best she can with water and scraps of cloth. I'm sorry, she whispers. Not your fault. Will you be okay? You want to say yes. You want to be reassuring. Instead, you tell her the truth. Probably not. But the next morning, you put on the costume. You paint on the smile. You perform for the departing guests. Because that's what jesters do. They endure. The scars from the whipping heal slowly, leaving pale lines across your back that pull and ache when you move. They're a reminder, as if you needed one, of how precarious your position is. One failed performance, one bad mood, one moment of displeasure, and you're back at the post. You become more cautious in your material, pulling back from the edge of satire. Better to be safe and forgettable than sharp and punished. Alice notices the change, but doesn't comment. She's learning her own lessons about survival. Spring turns to summer. The castle is hot now, the stone walls radiating stored heat like an oven. Your costume is unbearable in the warmth, the wool scratching and trapping sweat. You're not allowed to modify it. The Earl wants authenticity, whatever that means. You develop a rash under your arms from the constant moisture. It doesn't heal, just gets worse. Occasionally bleeding when you move too vigorously. There's no salve, no treatment. You tear strips from your undershirt to provide some barrier between cloth and raw skin. It helps a little. One evening, during a quiet moment, Alice asks you about Maud. Where do you think she went? I don't know. Away, hopefully. Do you think she made it? You consider lying, offering some comforting fiction about Maud finding happiness in a distant village. But Alice deserves honesty. I think she probably died within a week. No one wants to hire a former jester. We're marked, tainted, and without coin or skills beyond entertainment, survival would be almost impossible. Alice is quiet for a long time. Then, so we're trapped. Yes, forever. Or until we're no longer useful. She doesn't ask what happens then. She doesn't need to. The conversation haunts you both. You see it in the way Alice performs now, a desperate edge to her acrobatics, as if she's trying to prove her value with every flip. You see it in the mirror when you catch glimpses of yourself, the hunted look of an animal that knows its prey. The next crisis comes without warning. The Earl's wife falls ill, not seriously, just a summer cold, but the Earl is beside himself with worry. In his anxiety, he becomes erratic, lashing out at anyone within reach. You're called to perform, to lift his spirits. But how do you make someone laugh when they're terrified of losing someone they love? Every joke falls flat. Every attempt at levity feels inappropriate. After 15 minutes of failed entertainment, the Earl dismisses you with a wave. Get out, you're useless. You retreat, knowing that useless is one step away from expendable. For the next 3 days, while the Earl's wife recovers, you're in a state of constant dread, waiting for Godfrey to announce your dismissal. But the Earl's wife recovers, and the Earl, relieved, forgets his displeasure. You've survived by pure luck, by the whim of a summer cold that resolved itself. This is your life now, surviving from one near disaster to the next, held in place by forces beyond your control, waiting for the moment when your luck finally runs out. One afternoon, you're summoned to the Earl's solar along with Alice. This is unusual. Joint summons are rare. The Earl is studying a map when you enter. He looks up, expression unreadable. There's to be a battle. Minor dispute with a neighbouring lord over water rights. I'm leading a force to settle it. Your stomach drops. You'll both accompany me. Jesters are good for morale. It's not a request. It's never a request. You're given 2 days to prepare, though there's nothing to prepare. You own nothing but your costume and a few personal items. The idea of going to war is so absurd, so disconnected from any version of reality you understand, that you can barely process it. Alice is even more terrified than you are. I can't go to a battle. I'll die. We'll probably both die. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. The departure is chaos. 50 men-at-arms, supply wagons, horses, and somewhere in the middle of it all, 2 jesters in bright costumes that make you look like exotic birds in a flock of crows. The Earl rides at the front, armour gleaming. You and Alice walk with the camp followers, the prostitutes and merchants and cooks who trail armies like flies on a corpse. The journey takes 4 days. You walk the entire time, your soft feet developing blisters that burst and reform. At night, you sleep under wagons when it rains, in open fields when it doesn't. The bells on your costume attract attention, most of it unwelcome. Soldiers find it hilarious to trip you, to push you into mud, to make you perform for their amusement at all hours. One night, a drunk soldier grabs Alice and tries to drag her into the darkness. You intervene without thinking, screaming and hitting him with your bauble. He's so surprised that a jester is fighting back that he lets go. Then he punches you in the face, dropping you like a stone. Alice escapes. Your nose breaks with a crunch you feel more than hear. Blood pours down your face, soaking into your costume. The soldier laughs and returns to his fire. No one helps you. No one even comments. This is just what happens to jesters at war. You eventually stop the bleeding with a cloth pressed to your face. Your nose is crooked now, healed wrong. Just another scar, another story you'll never tell. The battle itself is anticlimax wrapped in terror. 2 small armies meet in a field near a river. You and Alice are positioned with the supply wagons, far enough back to be relatively safe, close enough to see the carnage. The Earl wants entertainment before the fighting starts. He wants his men in good spirits. So you perform, you juggle, you tell jokes, you do your dog routine, barking and prancing while men prepare to kill each other. The disconnect between your actions and the situation is so profound it feels like madness. You're making people laugh while they check the sharpness of their swords. You're doing pratfalls while men write final letters to their families. Then the horn sounds. The 2 forces collide with a sound like thunder, metal on metal, screams and war cries mixing into a cacophony that makes your teeth ache. You watch men die. It's not clean or heroic. It's ugly and wet and terrifying. You see a man take an axe to the skull and drop instantly. You see another clutching at intestines that are spilling from a stomach wound, screaming for his mother. You see a horse go down, thrashing, crushing its rider underneath. The whole thing lasts maybe 15 minutes. The Earl's forces win, barely. Afterward, there's more screaming as the wounded are tended to, or not tended to, depending on their importance. You're expected to entertain again that night, during the victory celebration. You can still smell blood in the air. You can hear the wounded crying in the medical tent. But you perform because that's your job. You tell a story about a brave knight who defeats a dragon. The men cheer. You feel like you're going to vomit. One of the Earl's advisors approaches you afterward. Good work. You kept the men's spirits up. You don't respond. What would you say? That you feel complicit in the violence? That entertaining killers makes you a participant in their killing? That you want to run screaming into the night? Instead, you nod. Thank you, my lord. That night, you can't sleep. Every time you close your eyes, you see the man with the axe in his skull. You see the crushed rider. You see Alice's face when she was grabbed by the soldier. War, you realize, is just another performance venue. Another place where jesters are expected to make light of darkness, to find humor in horror, to pretend that any of this makes sense. The return journey is subdued. Several men died, more were wounded. The Earl is pleased with his victory, but quiet. The water rights dispute has been settled. It cost 8 lives and countless injuries. Everyone agrees it was worth it. You don't agree, but your agreement was never requested. Back at the castle, things return to normal with disturbing speed. The dead are buried or forgotten. The wounded recover or don't. You resume your daily performances as if you didn't just witness combat. But something has changed in you. A hardness, a coldness that wasn't there before. You've seen the worst of what humans can do to each other, and you've been forced to smile through it all. Alice notices. Are you all right? No. Me neither. You sit together in silence. Two survivors of an experience that no one else will acknowledge as traumatic. Jesters don't get trauma. Jesters make jokes. The Earl summons you a week later with a special request. His nephew is visiting, a boy of 13, and the Earl wants him entertained. You're to spend the day with the child, teaching him about court life, keeping him occupied. The nephew, Thomas, is polite but clearly uncomfortable with the entire arrangement. He doesn't want a jester. He wants to be training with swords or studying with tutors. But his uncle has decreed entertainment, so entertainment he gets. You try everything: juggling, stories, jokes. Thomas watches with the expression of someone enduring dental surgery. Finally, in desperation, you just talk to him normally, dropping the jester persona. You don't have to pretend to be amused, you say. I know this is stupid. Thomas blinks, surprised. You're not supposed to say that. Who's going to tell? You? He considers, then smiles for the first time. What's it like? Being a fool? You think about lying, spinning some tale about the glamour and excitement. But Thomas is looking at you with genuine curiosity, and you're tired of performing. It's horrible, you admit. Every day you're afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, being in the wrong place. You're never safe. You're never respected. You're a thing people use for amusement and discard when they're bored. Thomas is quiet for a long moment. Why don't you leave? Where would I go? What would I do? This is all I am now. The boy looks thoughtful. Then, that's very sad. Yes, it is. You spend the rest of the day teaching Thomas card tricks. He's good at them, better than you ever were. He's smart, kind, everything the Earl isn't. You find yourself hoping that Thomas never becomes like his uncle, that somehow he retains his humanity despite his privilege. When the Earl asks later how the day went, you report that Thomas was well entertained. The Earl is pleased. Thomas doesn't contradict you, though he could. That small mercy, that moment of genuine connection, is the most human interaction you've had in months. It sustains you for a while, that memory of being seen as a person rather than a performer. But like all good things in your life, it fades, replaced by the grinding monotony of daily survival. You're approaching your second year at the castle. The anniversary passes without acknowledgement. Jesters don't get celebrated, but you mark it privately, counting the days you've survived, the performances you've endured, the scars you've accumulated. Alice asks you one evening, how long can we keep doing this? You don't have an answer. Maybe forever. Maybe until tomorrow. In a job where your life depends on making people laugh, long-term planning is impossible. All you know is that you're still here, still performing, still wearing the costume that has become your skin. And that has to be enough, because it's all you have. The winter arrives again. You're second at the castle. The cold feels more oppressive this year, settling into your bones like it's found a permanent home. Your costume, thin and bright and useless against the chill, offers no protection. You've learned to move quickly between drafty corridors, to huddle close to any source of warmth, to keep performing even when your fingers are too numb to feel the props you juggle. But this winter brings something new, a sickness that sweeps through the castle like a flood. It starts with the servants, kitchen workers coughing into their sleeves, chambermaids calling in sick. Then it reaches the nobles, and then, inevitably, it reaches you. It's not the plague, thank God, but it's bad enough. Fever, cough, body aches that make even simple movements agony. You try to hide it, knowing that sick jesters are useless jesters. You perform through chattering teeth, through sweat that soaks your costume, through a dizziness that makes the room tilt. The Earl notices, of course. You look terrible. Thank you, my lord. I've been practicing. The joke falls flat. He waves you away, disgusted. Get out of my sight until you're better. It's the closest thing to mercy you've received. You stumble back to your room and collapse onto your straw mat, shivering uncontrollably. Alice is already sick, curled into a ball and moaning softly. There's no fire in the brazier, no one to tend to you. You're on your own. For 3 days, you drift in and out of fever dreams. You dream about your old life, about markets and apples, about choices you could have made differently. You dream about Maud, wondering if she's warm wherever she is. You dream about dying, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently, always with relief. On the 4th day, the fever breaks. You wake weak and shaky, but alive. Alice is also recovering, slowly. You help each other sip water, share the heel of bread someone left outside your door. You're both too weak to perform, but you're alive. That's something. The Earl is less pleased. When you're finally strong enough to return to your duties, he makes his displeasure clear. 2 weeks. You've been useless for 2 weeks. I should dock your pay. What pay, you want to ask? But you hold your tongue. I apologize, my lord. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. You return to performing, still weak, still coughing occasionally. The room spins sometimes when you do acrobatics. You learn to work through it, to hide the tremors and the exhaustion. The audience doesn't care if you're healthy. They just want entertainment. The sickness changes something in Alice. She's more reckless now, pushing herself harder than necessary. She performs dangerous stunts without proper preparation, flips with insufficient clearance, juggles with fire despite having poor depth perception from her recent fever. You try to warn her, but she won't listen. If I'm going to die here anyway, I might as well go out doing something impressive. It's the logic of despair, and you recognize it because you felt it yourself. The overwhelming sense of futility that makes self-preservation seem pointless. One evening, during a banquet, Alice attempts a backflip off a table. She's done it before, many times. But tonight, still weakened from her illness, she miscalculates. She lands wrong, her ankle twisting with an audible crack. She screams. The room goes silent. Then, because this is the world you live in, someone laughs. And once one person laughs, others join in. Soon the entire hall is roaring with laughter at Alice writhing on the floor in agony. You rush to help her, trying to pull her to her feet. She can't stand. The ankle is broken, clearly and severely. She needs a physician, setting, splinting. She needs care. The Earl waves dismissively. Get her out of here. She's ruining the mood. You half carry, half drag Alice from the hall. In the corridor, away from the laughter, she sobs. Not from pain, though that must be intense. From humiliation, from the realization of what this injury means. I can't perform, she gasps between sobs. If I can't perform, what happens to me? You don't answer because you don't have to. You both know. Godfrey arranges for Alice to be tended by the castle physician, a rare mercy. but the prognosis is grim. The ankle is badly broken. Even with proper care, she'll never have the mobility she once had. Her acrobatic career is over. The Earl dismisses her a week later. No ceremony, no farewell. Just Godfrey delivering the news with his usual blank efficiency. You're to leave tomorrow morning. Take your things. Alice looks at you with empty eyes. Where do I go? There's a church in the village. They take in people. Sometimes. It's a polite way of saying beggars. Alice will be begging for charity, surviving on scraps, living with the same stigma that made her vulnerable to becoming a jester in the first place. The circle is complete. She leaves before dawn. You don't watch her go. You can't. You're alone now. The senior jester, the only jester. The Earl hasn't hired a replacement. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. For now, you're it. The loneliness is crushing. You'd gotten used to having someone to share the burden with, someone who understood without needing explanation. Now you're back to solitary survival, carrying the entire weight of the Earl's amusement on your own shoulders. You throw yourself into work, developing new routines, perfecting old ones. You learn to play the lute with mediocre competence. You memorize 100 new jokes, most of them terrible. You practice until your body aches and your mind is numb. Because what else is there? One night, alone in your room, you find yourself crying. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that won't stop. You're not even sure what triggered it. The accumulated weight of everything maybe. The isolation, the fear, the grinding certainty that this is your life until it isn't. Until you're used up and discarded like Alice, like Edmund, like everyone who came before. You cry yourself to sleep, and when you wake, you put on the costume and perform as if nothing happened. Because that's what jesters do. Spring comes again. You're third at the castle. You're a veteran now, one of the longest-serving jesters in recent memory. This should feel like an accomplishment. It just feels like you've been trapped longer than most. The Earl is hosting a wedding. His cousin is marrying some minor noblewoman, and the castle is preparing for a week of festivities. This means constant performances, endless hours of being on, no rest, no privacy, just work. You're expected to be everywhere, entertaining guests during meals, performing during the ceremony itself, keeping children occupied, making adults laugh. You're running on pure adrenaline and willpower by the third day, barely sleeping, eating only when someone shoves food in your direction. During the wedding feast, you're doing your routine when you notice a woman watching you intently. She's older, maybe 50, dressed in simple but well-made clothes. Not nobility, but not a servant either. When your eyes meet, she nods slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that feels almost respectful. After your performance, she approaches. You're very talented. Thank you, my lady. I used to be like you, a performer, in a different time, in a different place. You study her face, looking for signs of the costume, the bells, the shame. You don't see them. She's just a woman, ordinary and free. How did you stop? She smiles sadly. I got old. They let me go. I nearly starved, but I found work eventually. Cooking, cleaning, normal work. It was hard, but it was mine. No one laughing at me, no one owning me. Did it get better? Eventually. Not at first, but eventually. She hands you something, a small cloth bundle. Inside is bread, cheese, and a silver coin. For when you're ready, she says, and walks away before you can respond. You pocket the bundle quickly, before anyone notices. It's not much, it wouldn't get you far. But it's the first time anyone has offered you an escape route, however small. That night, you lie awake thinking about leaving. really leaving, not just fantasizing, but actually planning it. You'd need to save more coin, wait for the right moment, probably during another tournament or major event when security is lax. But then what? The woman said it was hard. She nearly starved. And she was just a performer, not a jester. You're marked, tainted by association with nobility. People would recognize the costume's influence even if you burned it. You'd be starting from less than nothing. And yet, the possibility exists. Someone escaped and survived. That has to mean something. You don't make any decisions that night. But the seed has been planted. The wedding concludes successfully. The Earl is pleased with how everything went, particularly the entertainment. He even gives you a bonus, 3 silver coins. More wealth than you've ever held at once. You hide the coins carefully, adding them to the woman's gift. You now have 4 silver coins, enough to survive for maybe a month if you're careful. Not enough to guarantee safety, but more than you've ever had. Over the following weeks, you become more conscious of money, of opportunities. You start taking small jobs on the side, telling fortunes for servants, made up nonsense, but they don't know that. Helping write letters for the illiterate in exchange for copper pieces. It's slow, but your stash grows. You also start paying attention to the castle's rhythms, to when guards change shifts, to which gates are least monitored, to how travelers come and go. You're not planning anything specific. You're just preparing, just in case. One afternoon, the Earl summons you with unusual urgency. When you arrive, his face is strained. My mother has died. You feel a moment of genuine sympathy. Death is the great equalizer, affecting nobles and jesters alike. But you know your role. I'm very sorry, my lord. I need you to do something. At the funeral, I need you to not perform, just be there, silent. It's tradition to have a fool present, but obviously laughter would be inappropriate. Of course, my lord. The funeral is 3 days later. You stand in the back of the chapel, wearing your costume but silent and still. You feel the eyes of mourners on you occasionally, wondering why the fool is here, why he's not speaking. You don't explain because you can't. But as you stand there, listening to prayers for the dead, you realize something. The Earl's mother was probably kind to you once or twice. Most nobles ignored jesters entirely, but she would occasionally smile, acknowledge your presence. Small mercies, easily forgotten. And now she's dead. And you're standing in your ridiculous costume at her funeral, because tradition demands a fool bear witness. It's grotesque and poignant in equal measure. After the ceremony, the Earl approaches you privately. Thank you. I know it was strange, but it meant something to me. I'm glad I could help, my lord. He looks at you for a long moment, and for once, he doesn't see a jester. He sees a person. You've been here a long time. You've served me well. Thank you, my lord. I want you to know I appreciate it. It's the closest thing to genuine kindness the Earl has ever shown you. It should make you happy. Instead, it makes you sad, because you realize this is as good as it gets. A moment of acknowledgement from a man who usually treats you like furniture. This is the peak of your career. That night, you count your coins. Again, 7 silver now, plus various copper pieces. Not a fortune, but more than most people have. Enough to maybe, possibly, survive. The decision crystallizes slowly, like ice forming on a pond. You're going to leave. Not today, maybe not next week, but soon. You're going to take your coins and your costume and walk away from the castle that's been your prison for 3 years. It's terrifying. It's stupid. It's the only thing that makes sense. You start preparing in earnest, stashing food, acquiring a traveling cloak through careful trading, memorizing the roads and towns nearby. You tell no one, not even considering it. The walls have ears, and loose lips could get you dragged back in chains. The opportunity comes during a harvest festival. The castle is chaos, nobles and common folk mixing. Gates open for deliveries. Everyone distracted by celebration. You wait until evening when the feast is in full swing, and your absence won't be immediately noticed. You change out of your jester costume for the first time in years. The regular clothes feel strange, too plain, too normal, but they also feel like freedom. You pack your costume in a sack, unable to fully leave it behind. It's evidence of who you were, proof you existed. Then you walk out, not running, not sneaking, just walking through the main gate like you have every right to be there. The guards don't stop you. Why would they? You're just a traveller in simple clothes, leaving after the festival. You make it to the road, then past the first bend, then to the crossroads where you turn south, away from the castle, away from the Earl, away from everything you've known for 3 years, and you keep walking. The first night alone is terrifying. You sleep in a ditch, wrapped in your cloak, jumping at every sound. Every snap of a twig could be pursuers. Every distant voice could be guards coming to drag you back. But morning comes and you're still free. You walk to the nearest town, a small market village that doesn't know you, doesn't care where you came from. You buy bread with one of your coins and eat it slowly, savoring every bite like it's your first meal. You're not safe. You might never be safe. The Earl could send men to find you, might consider you a runaway, might want to make an example. Or he might just shrug and hire a new jester, forgetting you ever existed. You don't know which would be worse. For now, you're free. Hungry, scared, unsure, but free. You still flinch at loud noises. You still have the urge to perform when people look at you. You still sometimes wake up reaching for the bells that are no longer there. But slowly, day by day, you start to remember what it feels like to be human. You find work eventually. Not good work, but work. Helping at an inn, washing dishes, hauling water. The pay is terrible, barely enough to eat. But it's yours. No one laughs at you. No one hits you. No one owns you. Months pass, then a year. You never go back to the castle, though you sometimes wonder what happened after you left. Did the Earl rage? Did he shrug? Did he even notice? You'll probably never know. One evening, you're sweeping the inn floor when a travelling performer arrives. He's a jongleur, a musician and storyteller. He performs that night for the inn patrons, and he's good. Really good. The kind of good you could never be, not in the costume, not with the weight of expectation crushing you. After his performance, you approach him. That was impressive. Thank you. He studies you. You have the look of a performer yourself. Used to be. Long time ago. What stopped you? I wasn't free. He nods like he understands. And now, you think about the question. Are you free? Really? You still have nightmares about the Earl. You still flinch when people raise their voices. You still carry the costume in your pack, unable to let it go completely. But you're choosing how to live. That has to count for something. Now I'm trying to be. The jongleur smiles. That's the hardest performance of all. He's right. Being yourself, after years of being a fool, is harder than any routine you ever learned. You're still figuring out who you are beneath the bells and bright colours. It might take the rest of your life, but at least it's your life to figure out. Years later, you'll hear stories about the Earl, how he died in a hunting accident, how his son inherited, how the castle fell to disrepair and was eventually abandoned. You'll feel nothing hearing these stories. No satisfaction, no regret. They're just stories about people you used to know. Sometimes, very rarely, you'll see someone in a jester's costume, a performer at a fair, an entertainer at a wedding, and you'll watch them, seeing yourself in their forced smiles, their calculated movements, their trapped eyes, and you'll whisper a prayer for them, knowing they probably can't hear it, hoping somehow it reaches them anyway. A prayer that they survive, that they escape, that they find whatever freedom looks like for them, because you know now what you didn't know then. Being a jester isn't about making people laugh. It's about surviving despite impossible circumstances. It's about finding tiny moments of humanity in a role designed to strip you of it. It's about enduring when enduring seems impossible. And if you manage to survive, to escape, to become something more than the bells and the costume, maybe others can too. That's the story, the real story, not the romanticized tales of court fools and witty jesters, but the truth about what it meant to be a professional laughingstock in a world that ground people into dust for entertainment. The costume is still in your pack, wrapped carefully, preserved like a relic of a life you survived. You'll never wear it again, but you keep it. Evidence that you existed, that you mattered, even when the world told you didn't. You're not a jester anymore, but you'll never stop being a survivor. If you made it through this whole journey, I hope it opened your eyes to a part of medieval history that's usually glossed over with jokes and caricature. The reality was so much darker, more complex, and more human than the legends suggest. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the brutal truth, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that refuses to look away from the hard truths. Drop your location and the current time in the comments. I love seeing who's exploring history with me, wherever you are in the world. Now rest easy, let your mind settle, and drift away into whatever dreams come next. Until next time, history friends.